day that was May 25th, 1979. I do not remember that date, but it was one of the worst plane crashes in American history. American Airlines Flight 191 was a regularly scheduled flight leaving O'Hare International Airport in Chicago, traveling to Los Angeles Airport. And the plane lost its left engine in takeoff and crashed into a field, just barely missing a trailer park. The 271 passengers on the plane were killed along with 2 people that were on the ground. And 3 months later, there was a report. Do any of you remember this happening? I'm not even sure how some people may remember. 3 months later, there was a report that came out detailing the cause of the crash. And the Chicago Tribune reported it as an improperly repaired engine mount gave way under the 40,000 pounds of pressure, and compounding the problem, it smashed the forward edge of the swing, severing the hydraulic lines controlling that wing. Now, a lot of that I don't understand because I don't understand airplanes that much, but engines don't just fall off of planes. Their investigation found that the engine fell off because of sustained neglect of the maintenance. I wonder, have you ever felt like the engine of your plane was about to fall off? Maybe it's a traumatic event that happened to you, a bad surprise that caught you off guard, an unexpected illness, an accident that just spun your world out of control. Maybe it was just this past season. Christmas time can be a time where there's a flurry of activity and you can quickly become overwhelmed. Life in general, though, even when it's not the holidays, calls us to always go and to do and to be busy. Our days can feel jumbled, going from task to task or meeting to meeting, and our evenings can also seem sometimes like monotonous routines of quickly eaten dinners before we rush, or eating while we rush off to one activity or another so ourselves or our kids can stay engaged and active. And the weekends really are no different. Now there are birthday parties and sporting events on both Saturdays and Sundays, and we try to mix that with, basic things that we need to do, like grocery shopping, that now you can just order your groceries online and they can come right to your door or right to your car for those who don't even have time to walk into a store. How many of you have said the line, "I'm so busy"? Anyone? Or, "I haven't sat down all day"? Maybe you think that to yourself. Or, "My calendar is booked. There's no room." We continue to fill our lives with so many things, and so it's no wonder that we have trouble finding rest for our souls. It's so easy to feel weary, and so if you are feeling that right now, you're not alone. Our need for rest has inspired our sermon series starting today, where we're going to dig a little deeper into what that might mean for us. And our scripture reading today, which I will get to in just a little bit, comes from a book in our Old Testament, 1 Kings. 1 Kings, one of the big stars of 1 Kings is Elijah, who is a prophet. And that's something that's not always easily understood. God used prophets in the Old Testament to demonstrate God's reality, to speak truth to power, to help people turn towards God. God still uses prophets today. Prophecy is a spiritual gift. And I think, though, that God calls all Christians to be a prophetic witness. And so the Old Testament prophets can in some ways help to point us in the ways that we are called to be prophetic. But our story today comes from a time when people are divided into 2 kingdoms, and I'm giving you the background of our scripture message, so just stay with me. There's a cool story with it too that leads us right into today to understand it more. So Israel's divided into 2 kingdoms, and the northern kingdom is ruled by King Ahab, who was described as the most evil king more than any other king before him. He had a wife named Jezebel who introduced the worship of the god Baal to the people. And Baal was known as the agricultural god, giver of rain that ensured the growth of crops. So up until this point, people had been in drought for 3 years. So God calls on Elijah the prophet to go to King Ahab to tell him that God would be sending rain. And Elijah asks Ahab then to gather all of the Israelites together and all of the prophets who worship Baal, and to take both of those groups onto the top of Mount Carmel. It's a pretty cool story that has been sometimes known as the showdown on Mount Carmel. I think it would be a really good movie. So Elijah's there, and he tells all the Israelites that they can't worship both God and Baal. They have to choose. And he sets up this contest between himself and the prophets of Baal. And he says that both of us are going to present a bull for sacrifice on this mountain. And you cry out to your God, I'm going to cry out to my God. And whichever, we're going to call out to my God, and you're going to call out to your God to send fire. And whichever sacrifice comes on fire, then we'll know who the true God is, right? So there's a lot that happens, and there's a bit of mockery on Elijah's part. It's a long story, but in the end, God wins, of course. God brings a fire that consumes everything. And then it gets pretty violent, and all the prophets of Baal are taken and killed. But then it's the end of drought, and this heavy rain comes. So that leads us to our reading for today. Now that you know all that context, it's important to know. This reading, you can follow along on the screens if you want, is from 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 1 through 8. So Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, "So may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life like the life of one of them by this time tomorrow." Well, then he was afraid. He got up and he fled for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah. He left his servant there. But he himself went on a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a solitary broom tree. He asked that he might die. "It is enough now, O Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors." Then he lay down under the broom tree and fell asleep. Suddenly, an angel touched him and said to him, "Get up and eat." He looked, and there at his head was a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. He ate and drank and lay down again. The angel of the Lord came a second time, touched him, and said, "Get up and eat, otherwise the journey will be too much for you." So he got up and ate and drank. Then he went in the strength of that food for 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the Mount of God. At that place he came to a cave and spent the night there. So Elijah is exhausted in this story. He has just run from his life, and in his exhaustion, he collapses. And for Elijah, the collapse is his turning point. He was fleeing for his life. He needed to escape, and so God gave him an opportunity to rest and to be nourished. And I think there are at least 3 things that we discover about rest from this passage. The first is that rest is necessary. Rest is necessary whether we prioritize it or not. Elijah was here running for his life, following God's call, yet also filled with fear. We don't want to get to the point of being pushed to a place of exhaustion, but it does happen. Some of you know the Sokolos family. They're a family in our church. They usually worship at 8:30. But on Friday, Kayla, Mike, and big brother Luca welcomed Elena Quinn into the family early Friday morning. And I love that new life happened on the same day that we celebrated the life of Russ King. I shared last week about Russ, who was 92 years old, a big part of our community, passed away, but we had a celebration of life on Friday, the same day that Elena was born. The flowers, by the way, that you see in Janie's place are all from Russ's funeral. They're so beautiful. But Saturday, I got to visit Elena in the hospital, and visiting babies is the most favorite part of my job. It just has to be, because it's so happy, and so I love going there to visit babies. And when I walked into the room, big brother Luca was there with his grandparents. Luca is 5 years old, and so I asked him what he thought of his baby sister, and he said, "Oh, she sleeps a lot." That was his reaction, among with other things. He was very adorable with her. But the National Sleep Foundation says it lists out different age groups and how much sleep each age group needs. So I thought it would be kind of neat to share it with you. I'm not going to ask you personally if you follow this, but for newborn up to 3 months, they need 14 to 17 hours of sleep a day. This is all a day per night, not week or a couple days, per day. School-age children, ages 6 to 13 years, need 9 to 11 hours. Teenagers, 14 to 17 years, need 8 to 10 hours. Adults, ages 18 to 64, I think most of us are in that category, need 7 to 9 hours. And then older adults, above 64, need 7 to 8 hours. So again, this is a rhetorical question. How many of you are fitting into this amount of sleep, into what the National Sleep Center says you need? I got to tell you that I have felt like a hypocrite writing this sermon because I don't get enough rest that I need in my life. So I am preaching to myself just as much as I am preaching to you. You are not alone if you don't fit into this diagram. The second thing that we find in this passage about rest is that rest is tied to accountability. Sometimes we can identify where and when rest is needed, and other times we need someone in our life, like the angel who came alongside Elijah to help identify that rest was needed. This was an artist's depiction from long ago, I'm sure, of Elijah and the angel. You know, perhaps God is calling you to come alongside someone who needs rest and to provide it in a way that you are able and gifted to do so. And then the third thing that we find in this passage is that rest helps us return. Once Elijah's basic needs are sustained, he goes back to Mount Horeb and he takes a step back to be more in touch with God. And the rest helped him to meet God and to return to work renewed. Now, I am a sucker for a really good biblical or theological meme. I love it when they pop up mostly from my seminary and other pastor friends on Facebook or social media. But this is one of my favorite ones. It came out a while ago in 2019. But this is what it says from Joy Clarkson. I don't know who she is, but it's brilliant. "This is your gentle reminder that one time in the Bible, Elijah was like, 'God, I'm so mad, I want to die.' So God said, 'Here's some food. Why don't you have a nap?' So Elijah slept, ate, and decided that things weren't so bad. Never underestimate the spiritual power of a nap and a snack." It's not easy to accept that invitation to rest, is it? And it might not just be physical rest that you are longing for. You know, some of us need rest from other things in life, emotional rest. Maybe we're spiritually exhausted from anxiety or worry or other junk that's filling up your life. But you also may be feeling like you just have too much to do, too many expectations that are placed on you. People need you. You can't let them down. You can't let your kids or your spouse or your teacher or your boss or your clients or your friends or even your church down. I've been known to be the queen of placing high expectations on myself. And it only leads to disappointment and feelings of failure because I can't do it all on my own. None of us can do it all on our own. And sometimes it's hard to accept the invitation to rest because we're holding too many things in our hands to accept it. So what might we put down? Sometimes we want God to give us more hours in the day. There's so many times I come home from work and I say, oh, there's not enough hours in the day, and we just want God to give us more hours, right? But what if God really wants to release us into rest instead of stretching us to do more? What if God really wants us to have a nap and a snack instead of doing one more thing? I'm someone who really likes practical things that I can do right now. And since I already shared with you, this sermon is very applicable to my life right now. I looked up some ways that we could maybe try out to ensure that we're taking time to rest. And so if you're someone who likes to write things down to remember them, you're invited to do that. But here are some things that I found. The first is to try to list 5 things that bring you joy and rest. So maybe that's reading a book, maybe it's skiing down a slope, maybe it's spending time with family, maybe it's taking a bubble bath. Whatever it is, keep that list handy and prioritize those restful moments, those moments that fill you and fill your heart. They're essential. Another option is to plan social media breaks. Social media can really drain your energy. Many of you know that, but we still can be so addicted to it. What would it look like for you to take maybe 1 or 2 days, even just a month, to disconnect from social media, or maybe even just turn your phones off or have a no-screen day? Someone I know keeps a timer on her phone and only spends 30 minutes a day on social media. So she'll go on and have a timer going for 30 minutes. She'll look through it, get whatever fix she needs from that. And then when the timer goes off, she's done. She puts her phone away and does something else. And that's really awesome. Maybe you can schedule rest around demanding days. So if you are a calendar person, if you have a demanding job perhaps, or a demanding schedule, when there's a particular demanding day, look 5 days ahead and block out rest in one of those 5 days. And that does not mean sleeping a full night. Plan a block of time for rest outside of sleeping hours. You need recovering time after intense days of work because we were not designed to work nonstop. And then lastly, maybe you can ask yourself, what's one thing that you can control? Maybe it's a few minutes of quiet time in the morning. Maybe it's a phone-free dinner. What can you control? There's a lot of things that are outside of our control, but what is something you can control? And then make that a priority. You know, resting really is a form of faith, because when we rest, we trust that God will take care of work and take care of you. And we really need rest. Our entire world is in desperate need of rest. There are too many engines that are falling out. Without maintenance, our soul will wear out. Too many souls aren't being restored. But we worship a Creator who wants to take care of us and to give us rest. So what might you let go of in your life to find that rest? I invite you to pray with me.